Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. As always, I hope you'll enjoy this legal education commentary. And today will be the day I earn that subscription. For today's evening coverage, we are dealing with the first committee hearing in about a year on the January 6th events. Congress decided that they want to have a hearing today, and they decided that they want to do it in prime time, which I suppose is pretty unusual. So we're doing this just now. And they will be starting in about 15 minutes. So we are just here to talk about this a little bit and talk about what we're going to expect. So, of course, the House Committee is holding a hearing about what transpired and why. They are expected eventually to reach a written report, which is currently anticipated for around September, which makes sense, of course, given the calendar. You want to get it out before the primaries, before the midterm elections. And this is meant to be apparently ostensibly some kind of update into what we know, what we've learned, and so forth and so on. So the report is already being written, and this will be a update on what's going on. Of course, what we'll actually get is mostly political speeches from both parties for campaign ads and for, constituent letters and so forth and so on. So you can kind of anticipate to some degree what everyone's going to say. Perhaps some shaming of the judiciary branch for not moving fast enough or not bringing strong enough charges. Probably some shaming of the U.S. Supreme Court in there for the hell of it. I would imagine that someone's going to throw in some gun violence issues or abortion in this for some reason. I would imagine that's going to come up. Perhaps a little bit of posturing for the political purposes. Of course, this entire thing is a political process by its nature. It is done by Congress, which is a political institution. And the remedies that Congress can pass are political in their nature, which could include legislation and are more likely to include them just whining and complaining of things. So we're gonna cover this and see what they have to say, and we'll respond to the testimony and respond to the statements from various members of the House, which should be very, very interesting for their posturing. Everyone is wearing their professional best today and has worked and rehearsed on their speeches for their campaign ads and for the snippets. So we covered the hearings of Judge Jackson, and we covered the hearings of Miss Cohen, Amy Coney Barrett. I apologize, Miss Barrett. And we are going to cover this, even though we kind of know where it's all going in the end, because why not? We'll learn something. I hope you do have a bingo card because it's all going to be. Yeah, people are going to mention the deaths of the police officers who died valiantly in the protection of the Capitol, even though that didn't happen. All that stuff. So, yeah, good times. So we're just waiting for them to start. They should be starting any moment now. Let's see what's going on the House floor. The House is doing something. There's just some speeches right now. Let me just change the audio source so we won't have feedback. So I'll just watch them. Now, can I make this bigger without making it full screen? No. Well, we'll make do. Can I make it a little bit bigger without making it full screen? All right, so let's share this screen. Share this screen. Can I share the audio input from this? Probably. Yes, great. All right, so there they are earlier today. So nothing going on so far. They'll give me a chance to adjust. Adjust things so it looks better. That's pretty good, I guess. Yep. So there's the room. The room where it happens. The room where it happens. And none of the members of the House are there yet, which is kind of funny, I guess, in its way. So we will wait for them to come in. Your birthday's January 6th? That's cool. You'll be happy to know that C-SPAN is powered by Comcast, Charter, Cox, Dish, Fios, and other people. I know there's no audio. I turned off the audio because there's nothing to listen to unless you really want to listen to room noise. If you have a Twitter account, if you would be so kind as to retweet a link to this stream, it is the pinned comment to help make sure people get notification of it. So if you have the Twitter, if you'd be so kind as to follow the link that's pinned to the top comment and retweet that so that people will get notice of it. We got our first super chat. Thank you. Alexandra Rolla. Hi, Kurt. Was hoping you would do this so I could watch from Brazil. Just wondering if I'm allowed here. Yes, you can. You are absolutely allowed here. Just have to be polite like everyone else. You are absolutely allowed here. We are just waiting for them to get started. This, of course, depends on them starting on time, which you know. Room nights can be calming, ambient, relaxing at times. I suppose that's true. So close to 100K? Yeah, we are close to 100K. We only need 4,000 more subscribers, as you can see. So if you have not subscribed already, I did have a good time in the bourbon place. I've made the stream unlisted while I try to fix the audio issues. I did a couple things processing it, but didn't really work. So next time, remote microphone. Everyone's coming into the room. Still no members of Congress are there with 9 minutes to go. The media is there. The gallery is there. What's the general format of this? I'm not exactly sure what the general format of this is, to be honest. There was ideas of witnesses, but I'm not actually sure what they wound up settling on. So it'd be a bit surprised me. How long is it going to go for? I'm not quite sure. How long it's going to go tonight. I'm not even sure when they're going to do more nights or more times. I'm not sure if there's going to be a second time. You think I should become a VTuber with a digital avatar? I don't know about that. That doesn't seem like me. They have said there's going to be more hearings, but when those hearings are going to be, I'm not quite sure. Let's listen to some ambient room noise. That'd be good. This is an interesting setup with the tables in there. Is this in a press room? I think this is some sort of side press room. Law Talk with Mike is here. Hello, Law Talk Mike. We're just doing the ASMR portion of the evening. I can't hear you, sir. No. I hear nothing, sir. Sounded like a noise. Did something turn on? No. I heard what sounded like a pop of a microphone.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
I was wondering why you weren't responding.
That'd be why.
That would be why.
Do you know who this guy is here in
the
with the chain?
From the start of the first,
because people seem to be taking a picture of him.
January 6th committee.
Is he related
On
to
your
one of the
screen
officers or
there
something, or is he an
former US
officer?
Capitol Police
Was
officer
injured?
I don't really
Peter
know
Dunn.
I don't really know the
He
characters here except
testified
for the
in
guy who wore the
person
hat.
at one of the investigating committee hearings. This is the first where they're reporting their results. 2 people testifying in person tonight. About 1,000 people have been interviewed or testified before the January 6th committee so far. The 2 live witnesses that you'll hear from tonight, Nick Quested, a British filmmaker who was embedded with the Proud Boys, and Caroline Edwards, who was the first U.S. Capitol Police officer injured by protesters. This is the
Okay.
Cannon House Office caucus room.
So they got some like tables there for the press and things. It's kind of a strange setup. They're using a big room.
Yeah, this is a tough one. It's just politically ugly. That's all there is to it. Are they taking questions, or are they just getting testimony from these people?
I'm not exactly sure what's going on us to this, because I wasn't going to cover that. I changed my mind basically at the last minute. So I changed my mind like as I was driving back from the distillery. I'm like, maybe I should cover it, see what happens. So I don't really know what's going on. It's going to be a surprise to me. I was trying to find some information about it. I understand they're going to hold more hearings, but I'm not sure when. So, yeah.
I don't really understand what the purpose of hearings is. I mean, there are a bunch of charges, and then they progress through court. Like who brings this? I don't even know.
Lynn says, how can I say no cops died? You mean from the events of January 6th themselves? Based on the official reports? That would be how. I mean, the one had, let's see, the one with the heart attack, which was not traceable. There was the one that self-deleted. There are no officer deaths that are traceable to the events of January 6th. Unless I missed a memo. So facts, evidence, usual way I try to reach conclusions.
And we're about 5 minutes away from the start of tonight's January 6th hearing. But if you have to leave and you still want to watch it live, go to C-SPAN Now. This is our mobile video app. You can download it for free wherever you get your apps, and you can watch the hearing in its entirety.
So you can check out that C-SPAN app. Yeah. So there was at least one officer who died of a stroke, one who died of a heart attack. I remember they released the autopsy results of one. Couldn't find any cause from January 6th. So that'd be why. While they're waiting till 8 p.m., well, they want to hit prime time. So they're going to do their 2 witnesses and some sort of mugging for the camera / get out your talking point for your newsletter kind of thing.
Well, they've got media.
They've definitely got a lot of media.
My problem with these sorts of things is it's so staged, and I get it. They're having a hearing, so they're calling witnesses and everything. But behind the scenes, this can just be so massaged, and it's politics.
I don't know if this comment is directed at me, but it goes into my frustration consistently with what I say and what I don't say. So I don't know if this is directed at me, but I'm going to pretend like it is directed at me. Police officers were injured. Several committed self-harm later. Crouch Hen, hang my pence and display news. Congressmen and women fear for their lives. Nothing burger. See, this is where I get frustrated because I didn't say it was a nothing burger. I was making a very specific claim. All I was claiming was that no officers died as a result of January 6th. That was it.
And this,
I,
and
I
this
did.
is
Did
why,
I say? Did I make a claim it was nothing burger? I don't remember making that claim.
and
So
this is the sort of these are the sorts of things that we don't want to cover this stuff, because people get emotional and nuts.
Yeah, it's like, please just listen to the actual words I say and what I am and am not saying. That would be great. Yeah. So maybe someone in chat did, but yeah, because I had a whole video where I was responding like about these allegations of misogyny, because like people apparently don't listen to the words I'm saying, and it's like let's go back to the tape.
You know what I liked? I liked your stream on Men's Cologne. I was laying down to go to bed, and I just had my phone, so I popped on. I'm like, oh my god, Kurt's doing a stream on Men's Cologne.
Yeah, got talking about Men's Cologne.
And at first, I thought you were doing a bit because you're funny, right? And that
No, I have the bottles. I have the bottles. Let's break them out. You know,
that would have been funny. But no, you were doing a very serious like review of colognes, and like either way, it works. Either way.
Well,
people don't know these things. I do makeup reviews now.
2021 attack on the Capitol.
Today I'm wearing Maybelline's Fit Me loose finishing powder to help with the shine. So
so far,
also for what it's worth, I gave myself this haircut. So hey,
scheduled. The hearing will begin in 2 minutes.
I have skills.
But as a reminder, we want to let you know that the January 6th committee hearings and all C-SPAN programming is brought to you as a public service by these television companies, including Comcast, Charter Communications, and Cox.
How'd Buckeye Broadband get into
has
this?
7 cameras in the caucus room, and they are the only ones in the caucus room tonight. C-SPAN is the only place for gavel-to-gavel.
I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of cameras in that room.
Hearings, free from bias or commentary. Now, as a reminder, if you have to step away during the next 2 hours and you want to,
okay, so it's supposed to be 2 hours longer, I guess.
Go to C-SPAN Now, which is
a mobile the doors
video
open
app, and you can download it
for them all to enter at once.
Wherever you
it's
get
on.
your apps.
They're all enter at once, like they're the Supreme Court or something.
This is the Senate chamber.
This apparently is the House caucus room. Well, this is what your future Supreme Court looks like with a big ass bench. So get used to that, I guess.
Are they still going to pack that thing?
Who knows? I would be. I definitely have abortion and gun control on my bingo card for tonight.
The Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol will be in order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to House Deposition Authority Regulation 10, the chair announces the committee's approval to release the deposition material presented during tonight's hearing. Thanks to everyone watching tonight for sharing part of your evening to learn the facts and causes of the events leading up to and including the violent attack on January 6, 2021. Our democracy, electoral system, and country. I'm Benny Thompson, chairman of the January 6, 2021 committee. I was born, raised, and still live in Bolton, Mississippi, a town with a population of 521, which is midway between Jackson and Vicksburg, Mississippi, and the Mississippi River. I'm from a part of the country where people justify the actions of slavery, the Ku Klux Klan, and lynching. I'm reminded of that dark history as I hear voices today try and justify the actions of the insurrectionists on January 6th, 2021. Over the next few weeks, hopefully you will get to know the other members, my colleagues up here, and me. We represent a diversity of communities from all over the United States, rural areas and cities, East Coast, West Coast, and the Heartland, all of us have one thing in common. We swore the same oath. That same oath that all members of Congress take upon taking office and afterwards every 2 years if they are reelected. We swore an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The words of the current oath taken by all of us that nearly every United States government employee takes have their roots in the Civil War. Throughout our history, the United States has fought against foreign enemies to preserve our democracy, electoral system, and country. When the United States Capitol was stormed and burned in 1814, foreign enemies were responsible. Afterward, in 1862, when American citizens had taken up arms against this country, Congress adopted a new oath to help make sure no person who had supported the rebellion could hold a position of public trust. Therefore, Congresspersons and United States federal government employees were required for the first time to swear an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That oath was put to test on January 6, 2021. The police officers who held the line that day honored their oath. Many came out of that day bloodied and broken. They still bear those wounds, visible and invisible. They did their duty. They repelled the mob and ended the occupation of the Capitol. They defended the Constitution against domestic enemies so that Congress could return, uphold our own oath, and count your votes to ensure the transfer of power, just as we've done for hundreds of years. But unlike in 1814, it was domestic enemies of the Constitution who stormed the Capitol and occupied the Capitol, who sought to thwart the will of the people to stop the transfer of power. And so they did, so at the encouragement of the President of the United States. The President of the United States trying to stop the transfer of power, a precedent that had stood for 220 years, even as our democracy had faced its most difficult tests. Thinking back again to the Civil War in the summer of 1864, the President of the United States believed we would be doomed to his bid for re-election. He believed his opponent, General George McClellan, would wave the white flag when it came to preserving the Union. But even with that grim fate hanging in the balance, President Lincoln was ready to accept the will of the voters, come what may. He made a quiet pledge. He wrote down the words, "This morning, as for some days past, it seems exceedingly probable that this administration will not be reelected. Then it will be my duty to so cooperate with the president-elect. It will be my duty." Lincoln sealed that memo and asked his cabinet secretaries to sign it sight unseen. He asked them to make the same commitment he did, to accept defeat if indeed defeat was the will of the people, to uphold the rule of law, to do what every president who came before him did, and what every president who followed him would do, until Donald Trump. Donald Trump lost the presidential election in 2020. The American people voted him out of office. It was not because of a rigged system. It was not because of voter fraud. Don't believe me? Hear what his former Attorney General had to say about it. I warn those who watching that this contains strong language.
Okay.
No, just what I've been through. I had 3 discussions with the president that I can recall. One was on November 23rd, one was on December 1st, and one was on December 14th. And I've been through sort of the give and take of those discussions. And in that context, I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit. And, I didn't want to be a part of it. And that's one of the reasons that went into me deciding to leave when I did. I observed, I think it was on December 1st, that, how can you can't live in a world where the incumbent administration stays in power based on its view, unsupported by specific evidence, that there was fraud in the election.
Bill Barr, on Election Day 2020, he was the Attorney General of the United States, the top law enforcement official in the country, telling the president exactly what he thought about claims of a stolen election. Donald Trump had his days in court to challenge the results. He was within his rights to seek those judgments. In the United States, law-abiding citizens have those tools for pursuing justice. He lost in the courts, just as he did at the ballot box. And in this country, that's the end of the line. But for Donald Trump, that was only the beginning of what became a sprawling, multi-step conspiracy aimed at overturning the presidential election, aimed at throwing out the votes of millions of Americans, your votes, your voice in our democracy, and replacing the will of the American people with his will to remain in power after his term ended. Donald Trump was at the center of this conspiracy, and ultimately, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, spurred a mob of domestic enemies of the Constitution to march down the Capitol and subvert American democracy. Any legal jargon you hear about seditious conspiracy, obstruction of an official proceeding, conspiracy to defraud the United States boils down to this. January 6th was the culmination of an attempted coup.
Legal
Brazen
jargon.
attempt, as one rioter put it shortly after January
Wow, is this guy
6th,
unimpressive?
overthrow the government. The violence was no accident. It represents Senate Trump's last stand, most desperate chance to halt the transfer of power. Now, you may hear those words and think, this is just another political attack on Donald Trump
It is.
by people who don't like him.
Yes.
I think
That's
you're.
not the case.
Oh, it isn't. Okay,
My
I feel better.
colleagues and I all wanted an outside independent commission to investigate January 6th, similar to what we had after 9/11. But after first agreeing to the idea, Donald Trump's allies in Congress put a stop to it.
What do you mean?
Apparently, they don't want January 6th investigated
You
at
guys,
all.
you guys have control of the
And
House.
in
What are you
the
talking
last
about?
17 months, many of those same people have tried to whitewash what happened on January 6th, to rewrite history, call it a tourist visit, label it legitimate political discourse. Donald Trump and his followers have adopted the words of the songwriter, "Do you believe me or your lying eyes?" We can't sweep what happened under the rug. The American people deserve answers. So I come before you this evening.
I'll send you a message,
not as
Detective Seeds.
Democrat, but as an American who swore an oath to defend the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't protect just Democrats or just Republicans. It protects all of us, we the people. And this scheme was an attempt to undermine the will of the people. So tonight, and over the next few weeks, we're going to remind you of the reality of what happened that day. But our work must do much more than just look backwards. The cause of our democracy remains in danger. The conspiracy to thwart the will of the people is not over. There are those in this audience who thirst for power, but have no love or respect for what makes America great: devotion
Maybe.
to the Constitution, allegiance
Some?
to the rule of law, our shared journey to build a more perfect union. January 6th and the lies that led to insurrection have put 2.5 centuries of constitutional democracy at risk. The world is watching what we do here. America has long been expected to be a shining city on the hill, a beacon of hope and freedom, a model for others when we are at our best. How can we play that role when our house is in such disorder? We must confront the truth with candor, resolve, and determination. We need to show that we are worthy of the gifts that are the birthright of every American. That begins here, and it begins now, with a true accounting of what happened and what led to the attack on our Constitution and our democracy. In this moment, when the dangers of our Constitution and our democracy loom large, nothing could be more important. Working alongside the public servants on this dais has been one of the greatest honors of my time in Congress. It's been a particular privilege to count as a partner in this effort and to count as a friend the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Cheney. She's a patriot, a public servant of profound courage, of devotion to her oath and the Constitution. It's my pleasure to recognize Ms. Cheney for her opening statement.
Oh,
Thank you very
Lord.
much, Mr. Chairman, and let me echo those
Here we have a
words
nice, fair,
about the
balanced
importance of
case going on tonight.
bipartisanship and what a
Yeah.
tremendous honor it is to work on this committee.
I think I
Mr.
got
Chairman,
plenty of
at
Jameson.
6:01 p.m. on January 6th, after he spent hours watching a violent mob besiege, attack, and invade our Capitol, Donald Trump tweeted, but he did not condemn the attack. Instead, he justified it. These are the things and events that happen, he said, when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who've been badly and unfairly
seriously can't
treated
watch this
for
propaganda.
so long.
I
As you will
can't do
see
it.
in the
Mike,
hearings
I
to
believe
come,
in you.
President
Sorry,
Trump
Kurt. I
believed
gotta.
his supporters at the Capitol.
If you go to
I
Liz
quote,
Cheney for the Republican
"Were doing
response,
what they
forget
should
it.
be doing." This is what he told
It's
his
politics.
staff
What do you want from me?
as
I
they
didn't choose her.
pleaded with him
No,
to
it's
call
great,
off
but
the mob,
I can't
to
kill 2
instruct his
hours
supporters to leave.
of this sort of
Over a
nonsense.
series of hearings in
All
the
right.
coming
Well, thanks for
weeks,
dropping by.
you will
Yeah.
hear
Nice seeing
testimony
you.
live and on video
See you, man.
from more than half a dozen former White House staff
I'll
of
stick
the
it
Trump
out with you.
administration,
Thanks.
all of whom were in the West Wing of the
Feeling
White House
unloved here.
on January 6th. You will hear testimony that, quote, the president did not really want to put anything out, calling off the riot or asking his supporters to leave. You will hear that President Trump was yelling and, quote, really angry at advisors who told him he needed to be doing something more. And aware of the rioters' chance to hang
Legal
Mike
Vices, you're more
Pence,
than welcome to
the
come.
president
You should have the
responded with
link.
this sentiment, quote, maybe our supporters have the right idea. Mike Pence, quote, deserves it. You will hear evidence that President Trump refused for hours to do what his staff, his family, and many of his other advisors begged him to do: immediately instruct his supporters to stand down and evacuate the Capitol. Tonight, you will see never-before-seen footage of the brutal attack on our Capitol, an attack that unfolded while a few blocks away, President Trump sat watching television in the dining room next to the Oval Office. You will hear audio from the brave police officers battling for their lives and ours, fighting to defend our democracy against a violent mob Donald Trump refused to call off. Tonight and in the weeks to come, you will
turn the
see
video
evidence of what motivated this violence, including directly from those who participated in this attack. You will see video of them explaining what caused them to do it. You will see their posts on social media. We will show you what they have said in federal court. On this point, there is no room for debate. Those who invaded our Capitol and battled law enforcement for hours were motivated by what President Trump had told them, that the election was stolen and that he was the rightful president.
Okay.
President Trump summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack.
But he didn't break the law.
You will also hear about plots to commit seditious conspiracy on January 6th, a crime defined in our laws as conspiring to overthrow,
Only the Proud Boys
put
so far have been
down,
charged
or
with seditious
destroy
conspiracy.
by force the government of the United States, or to oppose by force the authority thereof. Multiple members of two groups, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys,
All right, let's keep
have
pursuing
been
them.
charged with this crime for their involvement in the events leading up to and on January 6th. Some have pled guilty. The attack on our Capitol was not a spontaneous riot. Intelligence available before January 6th identified plans to, quote, invade the Capitol, occupy the Capitol, and take other steps to halt Congress's count of electoral votes that day. In our hearings to come, we will identify elements of those plans, and we will show specifically how a group of Proud Boys led a mob into the Capitol building on January 6th. Tonight, I'm going to describe for you some of what our committee has learned
And maybe even
highlight
cops.
initial findings you will see this month in our hearings. As you hear this, all Americans should keep in mind this fact. On the morning of January 6th, President Donald Trump's intention was to remain President of the United States, despite the lawful outcome of the 2020 election and in violation of his constitutional obligation to relinquish power. Over multiple months, Donald Trump oversaw and coordinated a sophisticated 7-part plan to overturn the presidential election and prevent the transfer of presidential power.
Were any of those
In our
parts
hearings, you
illegal?
will see evidence of each element of this plan.
Okay, were they illegal parts?
In our second hearing, you will see that Donald Trump and his advisors knew that he had in fact lost the election. But despite this, President Trump engaged in a massive effort to spread false and fraudulent information to convince huge portions of the US population that fraud had stolen the election from him.
Right.
This was not true.
Okay.
Jason Miller was a senior Trump campaign spokesman. In this clip, Miller describes a call between the Trump campaign's internal data expert and President Trump a few days after the 2020 election.
I was in the Oval Office, and at some point in the conversation, Matt Oskowski, who is the lead data person, was brought on. And I remember he delivered to the president pretty blunt terms that he was going to lose.
And that was based, Mr. Miller, on Matt and the data team's assessment of the sort of county by county, state by state results as reported?
Correct.
Alex Cannon was one of President Trump's campaign lawyers. He previously worked for the Trump Organization. One of his responsibilities was to assess allegations of election fraud in November 2020. Here is one sample of his testimony discussing what he told White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows.
I remember a call with Mr. Meadows, where Mr. Meadows was asking me what I was finding and if I was finding anything. And I remember sharing with him that we weren't finding anything that would be sufficient to change the results in any of the key states.
When was that conversation?
Probably in November, mid to late November. I think it was before my child was born.
And what was Mr. Meadows' reaction to that information?
I believe the words he used were, so there's no there there.
There's no there. The Trump campaign's general counsel, Matt Morgan, gave similar testimony. He explained that all of the fraud allegations and the campaign's other election arguments taken together and viewed in the best possible light for President Trump could still not change the outcome of the election. President Trump's Attorney General Bill Barr also told Donald Trump his election claims were wrong.
Repeatedly told the president in no uncertain terms that I did not see evidence of fraud and that would have affected the outcome of the election. And frankly, a year and a half later, I haven't seen anything to change my mind on that.
Attorney General Barr also told President Trump that his allegations about Dominion voting machines were groundless.
I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations, but they were made in such a sensational way that they obviously were influencing a lot of people, members of the public, that there was this systemic corruption in the system and that their votes didn't count and that these machines controlled by somebody else were actually determining it, which was complete nonsense. And it was being laid out there. And I told them that it was crazy stuff and they were wasting their time on that. And it was doing a grave disservice to the country.
But President Trump persisted, repeating the false Dominion allegations in public at least a dozen more times, even after his attorney general told him they were, quote, complete nonsense. And after Barr's resignation on December 23rd, the acting attorney general who replaced him, Jeff Rosen, and the acting deputy, Richard Donahue, told President Trump over and over again that the evidence did not support allegations he was making in public. Many of President Trump's White House staff also recognized that the evidence did not support the claims President Trump was making. This is the president's daughter commenting on Bill Barr's statement that the department found no fraud sufficient to overturn the election.
How did that affect your perspective about the election when Attorney General Barr made that statement?
It affected my perspective. I respect Attorney General Barr. So I accepted what he was saying.
As you will hear on Monday, the president had every right to litigate his campaign claims, but he ultimately lost more than 60 cases in state and federal courts. The president's claims in the election cases were so frivolous and unsupported that the president's lead lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, not only lost the lawsuits, his license to practice law was suspended. Here's what the court said of Mr. Giuliani. Giuliani communicated demonstrably false and misleading statements to courts, lawmakers, and the public at large in his capacity as lawyer for former President Donald J. Trump and the Trump campaign in connection with Trump's failed effort at re-election in 2020. As you will see in great detail in our hearings, President Trump ignored the rulings of our nation's courts. He ignored his own campaign leadership, his White House staff, many Republican state officials. He ignored the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security. President Trump invested millions of dollars of campaign funds purposely spreading false information, running ads he knew were false, and convincing millions of Americans that the election was corrupt and that he was the true president. As you will see, this misinformation campaign provoked the violence on January 6th. In our third hearing, you will see that President Trump corruptly planned to replace the Attorney General of the United States so the U.S. Justice Department would spread his false stolen election claims. In the days before January 6th, President Trump told his top Justice Department officials, quote, "Just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman." Senior Justice Department officials, men he had appointed, told him they could not do that because it was not true. So President Trump decided to replace them. He offered Jeff Clark, an environmental lawyer at the Justice Department, the job of acting Attorney General. President Trump wanted Mr. Clark to take a number of steps, including sending this letter to Georgia and 5 other states, saying the U.S. Department of Justice had, quote, identified significant concerns that may have impacted the outcome of the election. This letter is a lie. The Department of Justice had in fact repeatedly told President Trump exactly the opposite, that they had investigated his stolen election allegations and found no credible fraud that could impact the outcome of the election. This letter and others like it would have urged multiple states to withdraw their official and lawful electoral votes for Biden. Acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue described Jeff Clark's letter this way, quote, "This would be a grave step for the department to take and could have tremendous constitutional, political, and social ramifications for this country." The committee agrees with Mr. Donahue's assessment. Had Clark assumed the role of Attorney General in the days before January 6th and issued these letters, the ramifications could indeed have been grave. Mr. Donahue also said this about Clark's plan.
And I recall toward the end saying, what you're proposing is nothing less than the United States Justice Department meddling in the outcome of a presidential election.
In our hearings, you will hear firsthand how the senior leadership of the Department of Justice threatened to resign, how the White House counsel threatened to resign, and how they confronted Donald Trump and Jeff Clark in the Oval Office. The men involved, including Acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen and Acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue, were appointed by President Trump. These men honored their oaths of office, they did their duty, and you will hear from them in our hearings. By contrast, Jeff Clark has invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and refused to testify.
Which is his legal right.
Representative Scott Perry, who is also involved in trying to get Clark appointed as Attorney General, has refused to testify here.
Which is also his legal right.
As you will
You're not going to mention that?
Representative Perry
He mentioned how they have the right to
House
protest
weeks
in
after
court.
January 6th to seek a presidential pardon. Multiple other Republican congressmen also sought presidential pardons for their roles in attempting to overturn the 2020 election. In our fourth hearing, we will focus on President Trump's efforts to pressure Vice President Mike Pence.
Good news.
Did you just say fourth?
She said in our fourth hearing. Yeah, good news, guys. There's going to be at least 3 more of these.
Has spoken publicly about this.
President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president.
What President Trump demanded that Mike Pence do wasn't just wrong.
Third time's no longer the charm.
And it was
It's the fourth.
unconstitutional. You will hear this in great detail from the Vice President's former general counsel.
I love my tax dollars just going to this.
Explain how the former Vice President and his staff informed President Trump over and over again that what he was pressuring Mike Pence to do was illegal. As you will hear, President Trump engaged in a relentless effort to pressure Pence, both in private and in public. You will see the evidence of that pressure from multiple witnesses, live and on video. Vice President Pence demonstrated his loyalty to Donald Trump consistently over 4 years, but he knew that he had a higher duty to the United States Constitution. This is testimony from the Vice President's Chief of Staff.
So I think the Vice President was proud of his 4 years of service, and he felt like much had been accomplished in those 4 years. And I think he was proud to have stood beside the President for all that had been done. But I think he ultimately knew that his fidelity to the Constitution was his first and foremost oath. And that's what he articulated publicly, and I think that that's what he felt.
His fidelity to the Constitution was more important than his fidelity to President Trump and his desire.
The oath he took. Yep.
Yes.
You'll also hear about a lawyer named John Eastman. Mr. Eastman was deeply involved in President Trump's plans. You'll hear from former Fourth Circuit federal judge Michael Ludig, a highly respected leading conservative judge. John Eastman clerked for Judge Ludig. Judge Ludig provided counsel to the Vice President's team in the days before January 6th. The judge will explain how Eastman, quote, was wrong at every turn. And you will see the email exchanges between Eastman and the Vice President's counsel as the violent attack on Congress was underway. Mr. Jacob said this to Mr. Eastman: "Thanks to your bullshit, we are under siege." You will also see evidence that John Eastman did not actually believe the legal position he was taking. In fact, a month before the 2020 election, Eastman took exactly the opposite view on the same legal issues. In the course of the Select Committee's work to obtain information from Mr. Eastman, we have had occasion to present evidence to a federal judge. The judge evaluated the facts, and he reached the conclusion that President Trump's efforts to pressure Vice President Pence to act illegally by refusing to count electoral votes likely violated 2 federal criminal statutes. And the judge also said this: if Dr. Eastman and President Trump's plan had worked, it would have permanently ended the peaceful transition of power, undermining American democracy and the Constitution. If the country does not commit to investigating and pursuing accountability for those responsible, the court fears January 6th will repeat itself. Every American should read what this federal judge has written. The same judge, Judge Carter, issued another decision on Tuesday night, just this week, indicating that John Eastman and other Trump lawyers knew that their legal arguments had no real chance of success in court, but they relied on those arguments anyway to try to, quote, overturn a Democratic election. And you will hear that while Congress was under attack on January 6th and the hours following the violence, the Trump legal team in the Willard Hotel War Room continued to work to halt the count of electoral votes. In our 5th hearing, you will see evidence that President Trump corruptly pressured state legislators and election officials to change election results.
Hey, Detective Scenes, what are you doing for the next couple months?
Details about President Trump's
Hanging out with you if you want.
Excellent.
Urging them to, quote, find 11,780 votes that did not exist, and his efforts to get states to rescind certified electoral slates.
Guys, you'll
without
notice in our
factual
17th hearing, we still
contrary
haven't
to
found
law.
much.
You will hear new details about the Trump campaign and other Trump associates' efforts to instruct Republican officials in multiple states to create intentionally false electoral slates and transmit those slates to Congress, to the Vice President, and the National Archives, falsely certifying that Trump won states he actually lost. In our final 2 June hearings, you will hear how President Trump summoned a violent mob and directed them
in our final
illegally
2, so
to
that's
march
6 and 7
on the United
Through
States
the month of
Capitol.
June, yeah.
While the violence was underway, President Trump failed to take immediate action to stop the violence and
Law
instruct
Talk
his
with Mike will
supporters
have to be dragged
leave
in
the
the back.
Capitol. As we present these initial findings, keep 2 points in mind.
Initial findings through 7
First,
hearings.
our investigation is still ongoing, so what we make public here will not be the complete set of information we will ultimately disclose. And second, the Department of Justice is currently working with cooperating witnesses and has disclosed to date only some of the information it has identified from encrypted communications and other sources. On December 18th, 2020, a group, including General Michael Flynn, Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, and others, visited the White House.
You are
They
welcome.
stayed
I will be
late
here
into
for all
the
23 hearings. You got
We
it.
know that the group discussed a number of dramatic steps, including having the military seize voting machines and potentially rerun elections. You will also hear that President Trump met with that group alone for a period of time before White House lawyers and other staff discovered the group was there and rushed to intervene. A little more than an hour after Ms. Powell, Mr. Giuliani, General Flynn, and the others finally left the White House, President Trump sent the tweet on the screen now, telling people to come to Washington on January 6th. Be there, he instructed them. Will be wild. As you will see, this was a pivotal moment. This tweet initiated a chain of events.
Illegal.
The tweet led to the planning for what occurred on January 6th, including by the Proud Boys,
Where's
who
the proof of
ultimately
that?
led the invasion of the Capitol and
Good
the
question.
violence on that day. The indictment of a group of Proud Boys
Speculation.
alleges that they planned, quote, to oppose by force the authority of the government of the United States. And according to the Department of Justice, On January 6, 2021, the defendants directed, mobilized, and led members of the crowd onto the Capitol grounds and into the Capitol, leading to the dismantling of metal barricades, the destruction of property, the breaching of the Capitol building, and the assaults on law enforcement. Although certain former Trump officials have argued that they did not anticipate violence on January 6th, the evidence suggests otherwise. As you will see in our hearings, the White House was receiving specific reports in the days leading up to January 6th, including during President Trump's Ellipse rally, indicating that elements in the crowd were preparing for violence at the Capitol. And on the evening of January 5th,
Elements in the
President's
crowd.
close
How
advisor,
vague is that?
Steve Bannon, said this on his podcast.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. Just understand this. All hell is going to break loose tomorrow.
As part of our investigation, we will present information about what the White House and other
I can
intelligence
say without
agencies
hyperbole,
knew
I've never heard
and why
anything
the
as bad
Capitol
as
was
that.
not better prepared. But we will not lose sight of the fact that the Capitol Police did not cause the crowd to attack. And we will not blame the violence
They didn't
that
do a
day.
very good job of keeping them
Violence
out.
provoked by Donald Trump on the officers who bravely defended all of us. In our final hearing, you will hear a moment-by-moment account of the hours-long attack.
Is that an eighth hearing?
More than half a dozen White House staff.
It
both
implies an
live
eighth
in the
hearing.
hearing room and via
Congratulations, guys. You know
videotaped
where we'll be on the
testimony.
4th of July.
There's no doubt that President Trump was well
God bless
aware of the
America.
violence as it
Yep.
developed. White House staff urged President Trump to intervene and call off the mob. Here is a document written while the attack was underway by a member of the White House staff advising what the president needed to say. Quote, anyone who entered the Capitol without proper authority should leave immediately. This is exactly what his supporters on Capitol Hill and nationwide were urging the president to do. He would not. You will hear that leaders on Capitol Hill begged the president for help, including Republican leader McCarthy, who was, quote, scared, and called multiple members of President Trump's family after he could not persuade the president himself. Not only did President Trump refuse to tell the mob to leave the Capitol, he placed no call to any element of the United States government to instruct that the Capitol be defended. He did not call his Secretary of Defense on January 6th. He did not talk to his Attorney General. He did not talk to the Department of Homeland Security. President Trump gave no order to deploy the National Guard that day, and he made no effort to work with the Department of Justice to coordinate and deploy law enforcement assets. But Vice President Pence did each of those things. For example, here is what General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, testified to this committee.
There were two or three calls with Vice President Pence. He was very animated, and he issued very explicit, very direct, unambiguous orders. There was no question about that. And he was, and I can get you the exact quotes, I guess, from some of our records somewhere, but he was very animated, very direct, very firm, and to Secretary Miller. Get the military down here, get the Guard down here, put down this situation, et cetera.
By contrast, here is General Milley's description of his conversation with President Trump's Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, on January 6th.
He said, we have to kill the narrative that the vice president is making all the decisions. We need to establish the narrative that, that the president is still in charge and that things are steady or stable or words to that effect. I immediately interpret that as politics, politics, politics. Red flag for me personally, no action, but I remember it distinctly.
And you will hear from witnesses how the day played out inside the White House, how multiple White House staff resigned in disgust, and how President Trump would not ask his supporters to leave the Capitol. It was only after multiple hours of violence that President Trump finally released a video instructing the riotous mob to leave. And as he did so, he said to them, quote, "We love you, and you're very special."
What's wrong with love?
You will also hear
Hippies
that
love
in the
love.
immediate aftermath of January 6th, members of the president's family, White House staff, and others tried to step in to stabilize the situation, quote, "to land the plane before the presidential transition on January 20th. You will hear about members of the Trump cabinet discussing the possibility of invoking the 25th Amendment and replacing the President of the United States. Multiple members of President Trump's own cabinet resigned immediately after January 6th. One member of the cabinet suggested that the remaining cabinet officers needed to take a more active role in running the White House and the administration. But most emblematic of those days is this exchange of texts between Sean Hannity and former President Trump's press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany. Sean Hannity wrote, in part, "Key now, no more crazy people, no more stolen election talk. Yes, impeachment and 25th Amendment are real. Many people will quit." Ms. McEnany responded in part, "Love that. That's the playbook." The White House staff knew that President Trump was willing to entertain and use conspiracy theories to achieve his ends. They knew the president needed to be cut off from all of those who had encouraged him. They knew that President Donald Trump was too dangerous to be left alone, at least until he left office on January 20th. These are important facts for Congress and the American people to understand fully. When a president fails to take the steps necessary to preserve our union, or worse, causes a constitutional crisis, we're at a moment of maximum danger for our republic. Some in the White House took responsible steps to try to prevent January 6th. Others egged the president on. Others who could have acted refused to do so. In this case, the White House counsel was so concerned about potentially lawless activity that he threatened to resign multiple times. That is exceedingly rare and exceedingly serious. It requires immediate attention, especially when the entire team threatens to resign. However, in the Trump White House, it was not exceedingly rare, and it was not treated seriously. This is a clip of Jared Kushner addressing multiple threats by White House counsel Pat Cipollone and his team of lawyers to resign in the weeks before January 6th. Jared, are you aware of instances where Pat Cipollone threatened to resign?
I kind of, like I said, my interest at that time was on trying to get as many pardons done. And I know that, he was always, him and the team were always saying, oh, we're going to resign. We're not going to be here if this happens, if that happens. So I kind of took it up to just be whining, to be honest with you.
Whining. There's a reason why people serving in our government take an oath to the Constitution. As our founding fathers recognized, democracy is fragile. People in positions of public trust are duty-bound to defend it, to step forward when action is required. In our country, we don't swear an oath to an individual or a political party. We take our oath to defend the United States Constitution, and that oath must mean something. Tonight, I say this to my Republican colleagues who are defending the indefensible. There will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain.
Wow.
Finally,
Okay.
I ask all of our fellow Americans, as you watch our hearings over the coming weeks, please remember what's at stake.
Or years.
Remember the men and women who have fought and died so that we can live under the rule of law, not the rule of men. I ask you to think of the scene in our Capitol Rotunda on the night of January 6th. There, in a sacred space in our constitutional republic, the place where our presidents lie in state, watched over by statues of Washington and Jefferson, Lincoln and Grant, Eisenhower, Ford, and Reagan. Against every wall that night encircling the room, there were SWAT teams, men and women in tactical gear with long guns, deployed inside our Capitol building. There in the rotunda, these brave men and women rested beneath paintings, depicting the earliest scenes of our republic, including one painted in 1824, depicting George Washington resigning his commission, voluntarily relinquishing power, handing control of the Continental Army back to Congress. With this noble act, Washington set the indispensable example of the peaceful transfer of power, what President Reagan called nothing less than a miracle. The sacred obligation to defend this peaceful transfer of power has been honored by every American president, except one. As Americans, we all have a duty to ensure that what happened on January 6th never happens again, to set aside partisan battles, to stand together to perpetuate and preserve our great republic. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, that's a lot of opening.
As we provide answers to American people about January 6th, it's important that we remember exactly what took place.
And don't worry, guys, because in
That this was
September,
no
there's going to be
tourist
like an
visit
800-page
to the
report,
Capitol.
and we can read that together.
Most of the footage we are about to play has never been seen. The Select Committee obtained it as a part of our investigation. This isn't easy to watch.
Carefully
I want
select
to warn
committee.
everyone that this video includes violence and strong language. Without objection, I include in the record a video presentation of the violence of January 6th.
Proud of your boy! Proud of your boy! Proud of your boy!
Yeah, just for awareness, be advised, there's probably about 300 Proud Boys. They're marching eastbound in this 400 block of kind of Independence, actually on the mall towards the United States Capitol.
I am not allowed to say what's going to happen today because everyone's just going to have to watch for themselves. But it's going to happen. Something's going to happen.
Who speaks? Our streets! Who speaks? Our streets! Who speaks? Our streets! Don't hit you or hurt you. We are on your side. Don't make us go against you. I'm just picking a side. Pick a side. These are our streets.
20 bucks a picture. I hope Mike is going to do the right thing. I hope so. I hope so. Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election. All Vice President Pence has to do is send it back to the states to recertify. And we become president, and you are the happiest people. Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us. And if he doesn't, that will be a sad day for our country. Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Cruiser 50, it does look like we're going to have an ad hoc march stepping off here. There's a crowd surge heading east.
You have to set up better barriers.
You would think, right?
I mean, just a complete
Mike Pence, I hope you're going
and
to
utter
stand up
failure
for the
for
good
any type
of
of
our
riot training you've ever had.
and for the good
I mean, I've
of
never
our
had riot
country.
training. It looks a
And
little
if you're
thin in
not,
my
I'm
eye.
going to be very disappointed in you. I will tell you right now.
When I saw the overview of when it was going down, it was just a complete failure at all levels. Like those outside perimeters should be a hardened defense mechanism to keep them from funneling in like that.
That'd be a good idea. You know, I have absolutely no training of any kind. I think I could have designed something better.
Oh.
Or I could just call rent a fence, you know, with the chicken wire. That sounds good too.
Yeah, I mean, you see these. You want to, if possible, funnel them into those choke points, those stairwells, and block off the grassy areas. And there was just no effort to do that.
Vice President and the United States Senate.
We're gonna give riot warning. As soon as the outlet is here, we're gonna give riot warning. Gonna try and get compliance, but this is now effectively a riot.
49 hours declaring it a riot.
Cruiser 5 to 50 be advised, Cal Police 1 advised they're trying to breach and get to the Capitol.
Yeah, copy. We're outside like that. We're trying to make our way through all this.
I mean, I stick up for law enforcement when they're in the right, and I come down on them when they've messed up. And this was a complete failure.
Feels like it.
We have a breach of the Capitol. Breach of the Capitol to the upper level.
Be advised they're requesting additional resources on the east side as they've broken into that window and they're trying to kick it in.
Without objection, the chair declares the House in recess pursuant to Clause 12B of Rule 1.
Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. U.S. demands the truth. Bring out Pence. Bring out Pence. Bring out Pence.
I'm not sure that would work.
We can't hold this. We're going to get too many fucking people here. Look at this fucking bandit swim, man. We're fucked.
We need an area for the House members. They're all walking over now through the tunnels. We're trying to hold the upper deck. We're trying to hold the upper deck now. We need to hold the doors of the Capitol. I need Pence support. We lost the line. We lost the line. All entities get back. All entities get back up to the upper deck. All entities get back to the upper deck. ASAP.
Cruiser 50, be advised that Capitol Police is going to start moving their resources inside. We're gonna start the M4 officers first.
Okay, H208 with 4 members. The doors barricade. There's people flooded the hallways outside. We have no way out.
In fact, officers still remaining on the House floor, on the third floor, to use the subways themselves. It's time to evacuate so we can secure the members on the other side. Copy.
It's up to us people now, the American people. What are you ready to do? One more time. What are you ready to do? And whatever it takes, I'll lay my life down if it takes. Absolutely. That's why we showed up today. Bring the car out! Hey! I'm coming in to get out! Bring her out! Fuck you! You back up! I have myself on back.
Get him up! Get him up! Get him up! Hold up! Get him up!
If I can just address, I saw someone put in chat that Capitol Police and Secret Service couldn't have possibly been prepared for such a threat. Like, if they wanted, this might be an unpopular opinion, if they wanted to keep them out of the Capitol, they could have kept them out of the Capitol. You prepare for events, for your critical infrastructure. You prepare for events to protect them.
I would think.
So I saw that and just wanted to address that.
Get some roadside barriers,
There's just there's so much stuff at the federal level you have access to. I mean, we had tons of stuff at the state level for riot gear and stuff.
These were great people. The crowd was unbelievable. And I mentioned the word love, the love in the air. I've never seen anything like it.
This propaganda film has been brought to you by.
Pursuant to the order of the committee of tonight, the chair declares the committee in recess for a period of approximately 10 minutes.
All right. Well, we will cover a couple super chats while we are waiting for our friends at the Congress. So I'll just mute that audio so I don't have to deal with it. Do you have any thoughts before we go through a bunch of super? I have 23 super chats, I believe I've tagged.
It's become obviously so political. It's just for being a former officer, you try to stick to the facts and knowing what guys prepare for, and when you're expecting that amount of people on one location, like I see a couple people in chat, saying there was no way they could have prepared for that. There is. I've been on details where the president is coming into town, and you take those necessary steps where you're prepared to fall back to a central location, protected against all costs. If they wanted, and it's an unpopular opinion, if they wanted to keep people out of the Capitol, they could have kept them out of the Capitol. There is no doubt in my mind that there was not preparation for an event as catastrophic as what you see with people descending on the Capitol. That could have been done 100%.
Yeah. Legal Vices is here. Hi, Legal Vices. Did you hear the good news? We've got like 8 or 9 more of these.
I did. Can you hear me okay with these shitty phones I've got on?
They're fine, yes.
This is awesome office equipment. Sorry about that. I'm on my phone using borrowed Bluetooth earphones.
No worries. All right, so let's read through some super chats along the way. I do appreciate everyone who's here. 659 of you are here and watching is appreciated, and the people with super chat along the way is appreciated. So let's cover that. Peace and Love gave $1.99. Thanks for covering, guys. You are welcome. We will see how well this one responds, and based on people's interest in it, we may cover more. So we'll see. Wow, your audio is really bad.
Oh, sorry.
I'm getting feedback. I'm getting echo. I'm hearing myself.
Well, shoot.
Okay. DLZ entry.
I guess that's not going to work, is it?
I mean, if I'm going to hear myself, it's going to be very difficult to talk. DL Zero Entropy said a lot of the coverage of January 6th falls into the Amber Heard theory. So make something more believable by making it extreme. Police don't have to die for something, make it terrible, potentially terrible. This is true. Like, we don't have to exaggerate the reality of it to make it bad. And we can just talk about what actually happened and say, yeah, it's bad. I mean, I've done, I don't even know, 58 different videos on the Capitol riots, basically going through various criminal charges and being, except for one case where I thought, yeah, maybe he has a case. Basically going through the other 57 and being, yeah, they're all screwed. In terms of their criminal liability. So, like, yeah, we don't have to make it more worse. We can just deal with what actually happened. PA Grunt says, swore and oath they violate and attempt to subvert almost on a daily basis. They only speak this way in defense. Also, the worst things happened summer 2020. Arguable. I mean, it depends on your point of view, but they're definitely not treated with the same sort of zealousness, that's for sure. Mike Dean became a new member. Thank you for hitting that join button. Maria Hammond says, so both Kurt and Mike support Trump? Well, as to my comments in general, my comments were mostly based on the law. Like, I'm like, Trump didn't do anything illegal, where mostly my comments, it's like, I can't think of, his comments are legal. In terms of like incitement of riot, you're into Brandenburg versus Ohio in terms of incitement. You're allowed, the First Amendment protects lies. The First Amendment protects people. It even protects people encouraging people to do illegal things in general. It's like, yeah, it's like trying to, no, I got to mute illegal vice. This is not, yeah. You gotta, wow, man, I'm getting all kinds of feedback from your mic. It's like really bad. So I'll unmute you in a second, but you gotta fix that first, guy. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the law, I just can't find any legal errors and legal things. And like, as to the issues with the lawsuits, I covered those extensively. I covered about half of them, and the half I covered, yeah, they were all garbage in terms of the law. So like, I have no problems doing legal analysis if it goes against Trump or for Trump. It's like, yeah, the half of the lawsuits were garbage. Yeah, these 58 people are going to jail. It's like, yeah, but I can't find anything that Trump did illegal because of various case laws. So just trying to do a legal analysis for the most part. Legal Vice says he'll disconnect and reconnect. Yeah, we'll see. Tiger Cop says, wonder if Thompson will discuss his objection to presidential certification. Probably not, but I'm sure he has a really good reason why his was different. Someone says this is a national version of this. Could have been an email. Federica Thomas says, where's Camila when you need her objection? Yeah, unfortunately, we're in a political process, not legal. So the rules of evidence and rules of procedure have gone well outside the window. Jason says, thank you for covering this. Will they release the investigation of the police shooting of the young female, or how many feds were in the crowd? Probably not. PA Grunt. Sorry, Kurt, I'm out. I can't listen to these clowns. If I hear the Constitution one more time from these people who would gut it at every turn. Respect. Charles says, please call Chile as a witness. He'd fit right in. Cute. Goofy Foot says, there's video footage of every cracked corner and crevice in the building. They won't show any of it. That says it all. It might. Q squared. It's a farce. Not because Trump is squeaky clean, but because no matter how dirty he is, it doesn't really matter. Nothing will come of it. A president behind bars will look bad for the USA. Presidential privilege do be like that. Yeah, and also, like, I in just in terms of legal analysis, it's like hard to find a law that he really broke. I mean, at least to my eye. Whale Ear says, how many dog and ponies did they buy for this? It appears several. DL0 Entropy, so much for committing to cover all 23. I haven't committed to that yet, and I'm not sure it's necessarily a good idea, but I appreciate your super chat. Eagles Tallying says, as long as this group is in power office, I will never purposely visit DC. They've lost my faith forever. The Smithsonians are very nice. I recommend it. Allison Bond says, I can't believe K and M support Trump and criticize these hearings. You sound like Amber Heard supporters who don't believe the evidence. Well, as to I don't disbelieve the evidence. I just don't believe it drives you to any particular conclusion on the law. Because, as I said, like, I can't find any law that he's violated. Like, I tend to believe the evidence and what they're saying. It's just, in terms of legal analysis, I have a hard time finding anything, and that's most of my comments. You want to say Detective Seed?
I think that's where it gets lost in translation. Is like, just because we sit here and say, "Hey, I don't agree with this part," doesn't necessarily stipulate that we're sticking up for Trump or we're sticking up for whoever. It's like, we're a nation of laws, and we have to get down to the fact of, did he break a law? And so far, from what I've seen, I haven't seen where an actual law has been broken. So I think that's where things get lost in transition, because it's been so politicized.
I mean, it's lawful to ask people to come to DC on January 6th. It's lawful to give a speech. It's lawful to ask people to march on the Capitol and let their voices be heard. They do it all the time. There's a couple of First Amendment protections about that: freedom of speech and freedom to petition against redress of grievances and freedom of assembly. So I got 3 for on that.
I never heard him say, go break into the Capitol.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like trying to find, and it's like, oh, I really want Mike Pence to do this illegal thing. As I said, it's generally illegal to encourage people to do illegal things.
Yeah.
If that is not a crime, and to get to incitement under Brandenburg, you have to be imminent, and it's just not. So, like, trying to find some law that he broke, it's like, well, I haven't seen this former federal judge's analysis on these 2 crimes they think he broke, but like, maybe there is something, but I just haven't been able to find anything yet. So but I can turn right around and be like, yeah, all the people that enter the Capitol, they're all going to jail.
Yeah,
because of, like, well, it's at least for the vast part, because they all break the law. It's like, I can do the analysis both ways. It's no problem.
Yep.
DL0 Entropy says the first hearing is outlined in the next 68 hearings. It does seem like that, yes. And then with a slightly modified comment to outline the next 68 meetings. Either way, but your super chats appreciate. Q Squared says, I know it doesn't make sense to have the executive branch investigate itself, but it'd be a lot happier if it would accomplish anything. Yeah, I mean, Congress isn't doing anything improper in their process. If they can, it would probably be a good idea to tweak the Electoral Count Act, because there are some ambiguities in there that could be tweaked. And the Republicans wanted to do it. It's just the Democrats refused to do it unless it also came along with a whole bunch of other things, which is unfortunate, because, like, there are some points of ambiguity here that could be fixed, but, like, so, because, yeah. DLZO Entropy, ask question. Would you have committed to covering this if you knew there'd be 91 hearings? I said I'd do one as one off and see how it goes. Q-Squared, I look forward to reading page 60 out of that report. I don't think it's going to be nice. And unfortunately, Congress is back in. I say unfortunately both because it means no more super chats, and also because we have to go listen to them some more. So let's do that.
Page 69 could be sloppy.
I want to thank our witnesses for being with us this evening to share their firsthand accounts of that terrible day. I know that some of the witnesses from our first hearing are in the room with us.
It's definitely a crime to tell someone to do a crime. To encourage someone to break crimes is a little bit different. Like, yeah, you should break the law, or yeah, you should break that. To tell them to direct them to do something, yes. If I tell you to break the law, it's different. If I'm encouraging you, see, like, the language actually matters. Like, if I'm directing you to do something as my agent, then yes, we're in a conspiracy, or you're an accessory to me. So I'm telling you, go rob the bank. If I say, it'd be a good idea for you to rob the bank, that's not illegal. So there is a distinction there between the two.
And telling them to march on the Capitol is not the same context of go break in, knock all the windows out, and storm. I mean, it's 2 different things.
Yeah.
This is a graduate of the University of Georgia and currently is working on a master's degree in intelligence analysis from Johns Hopkins University. Nick Quisted is an acclaimed filmmaker whose credits include documenting stories from war zones in Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq. On January 6th, Mr. Quickstead was working on a documentary about, quote, why Americans are so divided when Americans have so much in common, end quote. During that day, Mr. Quickstead interviewed and documented movements of the people around the Capitol, including the first moments of the violence against the Capitol Police and the chaos that ensued. I will now swear in our witnesses. The witnesses will please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Swear or affirm, and you're not really supposed to add the "so help you God" part because of exactly
Let
that
the
reason.
record reflect the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Without objection, the witness's statement will be included in the record. Pursuant to Section 5C8 of House Resolution 503, I recognize myself for questioning. As you saw just a few minutes ago, the Proud Boys instigated the first breach of the Capitol just before 1:00 p.m., where rioters pushed over barricades near the Peace Circle at the foot of the Capitol. Our two witnesses tonight were both there at the time of that first breach. Officer Edwards was standing with other officers behind a line of bike racks that marked the perimeter of the Capitol grounds. She bravely tried to prevent an angry crowd from advancing on the Capitol. Unfortunately, she was overrun and knocked unconscious as the crowd advanced on the Capitol. Mr. Quickstead was a few yards away from Officer Edwards, taking footage of the Proud Boys as part of his work on a documentary film. Most of his footage has never been shown publicly before we shared it this evening. Officer Edwards, I'd like to start by asking if you could tell us why you believe it's important for you to share your story this evening with the committee and the American public. Please, your microphone.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Come on,
I
Elaine.
really appreciate it, and thank you to the committee for having me here to testify. I was called a lot of things on January 6, 2021 and the days thereafter. I was called Nancy Pelosi's dog, called incompetent, called a hero, and a villain. I was called a traitor to my country, my oath, and my Constitution. In actuality, I was none of those things. I was an American, standing face to face with other Americans, asking myself how many times, many times, how we had gotten here. I had been called names before, but never had my patriotism or duty been called into question. I, who got up every day, no matter how early the hour or how late I got in the night before, to put on my uniform and to protect America's symbol of democracy. I, who spent countless hours in the baking sun and freezing snow to make sure that America's elected officials were able to do their job. I, whose literal blood, sweat, and tears were shed that day defending the building that I spent countless holidays and weekends working in. I am the proud granddaughter of a Marine that fought in the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir in the Korean War. I think of my papa often in these days, how he was so young and thrown into a battle he never saw coming and answered the call at a great personal cost. How he lived the rest of his days with bullets and shrapnel in his legs, but never once complained about his sacrifice. I would like to think that he would be proud of me proud of his granddaughter that stood her ground that day and continued fighting, even though she was wounded, like he did many years ago. I am my grandfather's granddaughter, proud to put on a uniform and serve my country. They dared to question my honor. They dared to question my loyalty. And they dared to question my duty. I'm a proud American, and I will gladly sacrifice everything to make sure that the America my grandfather defended is here for many years to come. Thank you.
Officer Edwards, your story and your service is important, and I thank you for being here tonight. Ms. Quickstead, I also like to ask you to introduce yourself. Can you tell us how you found yourself in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021?
Good evening, Chair and Madam Vice Chair. Thank you for the introduction. As stated, in the winter of 2020, I was working on a documentary. As part of that documentary, I filmed several rallies in Washington, D.C. on December the 11th and December the 12th. And I learned there would be a rally on the Mall on January 6th. So my 3 colleagues and I came down to document the rally. According to the permit of the event, there was going to be a rally at the Ellipse. We arrived at the Mall and observed a large contingent of Proud Boys marching towards the Capitol. We filmed them, and almost immediately I was separated from my colleagues. I documented the crowd turn from protesters to rioters to insurrectionists. I was surprised at the size of the group, the anger and the profanity. And for anyone who didn't understand how violent that event was, I saw it, I documented it, and I experienced it. I heard incredibly aggressive chanting, and I subsequently shared that footage with the authorities. I'm here today pursuant to a House subpoena. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Quested. The Select Committee has conducted extensive investigative work to understand what led the Proud Boys and other rioters to the Capitol on January 6th. We've obtained substantial evidence showing that the president's December 19th tweet calling his followers to Washington, D.C. on January 6th energized individuals from the Proud Boys and other extremist groups. I'd like to play a brief video highlighting some of this evidence.
My name is Marcus Childress, and I'm an investigative counsel for the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol.
What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name.
supremacists and
Who would you like me to condemn?
white supremacists and right
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
After he made this comment, Enrique Terrio, then chairman of the Proud Boys, said on Parler, "Standing by, sir." During our investigation, we learned that this comment during the presidential debate actually led to an increase in membership from the Proud Boys.
Would you say that Proud Boys numbers increased after the stand back, stand by comment?
Exponentially. I'd say tripled probably, with the potential for a lot more eventually.
And did you ever sell any stand back and stand by merchandise?
One of the vendors on my page actually beat me to it, but I wish I would have made a stand back, stand by shirt.
On December 19th, President Trump tweeted about the January 6th rally and told attendees, "Be there, we'll be wild." Many of the witnesses that we interviewed were inspired by the president's call and came to DC for January 6th. But the extremists, they took it a step further. They viewed this tweet as a call to arms. A day later, the Department of Justice describes how the Proud Boys created a chat called the Ministry of Self-Defense Leadership Chat. In this chat, the Proud Boys established a command structure in anticipation of coming back to DC on January 6th. The Department of Justice describes Mr. Tarrio coming into possession of a document called the 1776 Returns, which describes individuals occupying key buildings around the United States Capitol. The Oath Keepers are another group that the committee investigated.
You better get your ass to DC, folks, this Saturday.
Yeah, if you don't, there'll be no more republic. But we're not going to let that happen. It's not even an if. It's either President Trump is encouraged and bolstered and strengthened to do what he must do, or we wind up in a bloody fight. We all know that. The fight's coming.
The Oath Keepers began planning to block the peaceful transfer of power shortly after the November 3rd election. And according to the Department of Justice, Stuart Rhodes, the Oath Keepers leader, said to his followers that we were not going to get through this without a civil war. In response to the December 19th, 2020 tweet by President Trump, the Oath Keepers focused on January 6th in Washington, D.C. In response to the tweet, one member, the president of the Florida chapter, put on social media, "The president called us to the Capitol. He wants us to make it wild." The goal was for the Oath Keepers to be called to duty so that they could keep the president in power, although President Trump had just lost the election. The committee learned that the Oath Keepers set up quick reaction forces outside of the city in Virginia where they stored arms. The goal of these quick reaction forces
Why didn't they
was
bring
to
it
be on
with them,
standby
though?
just in case President Trump invoked the Insurrection Act.
Did the Oath Keepers ever provide weapons to members?
I'm going to decline to answer that and put them at grounds and due process grounds.
In footage obtained by the committee, we learned that on the night of January 5th, Enrique Tarrio and Stuart Rhodes met in a parking garage in Washington, D.C.
The protection of the Constitution does include the Fifth Amendment, by the way. Just FYI. So when they invoke the Fifth Amendment, they should be pretty happy because
the Oath Keepers
by the Constitution
went into the Capitol through the east doors in two stack formations. The DOJ alleges that one of the stacks went into the Capitol looking for Speaker Pelosi, although they never found her. As the attack was unfolding, Mr. Tarrio took credit. In documents obtained by the Department of Justice, Mr. Tarrio said in an encrypted chat, "Make no mistake, and we did this." Later on that evening, Mr. Tarrio even posted a video which seemed to resemble him in front of the Capitol with a black cape. And the title of the video was Premonition. The evidence developed with a select committee in the Department of Justice highlights how each group participated on the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. In fact,
they're making artsy films, guys.
Revealed that it was individuals associated with the Proud Boys who instigated the initial breach at the Peace Circle at 12:53 p.m. Within 10 minutes, rioters had already filled the Lower West Plaza. By 2 o'clock, rioters had reached the doors on the West and the East plazas. And by 2:13, rioters had actually broken through the Senate wing door and gotten into the Capitol building. A series of breaches followed. At 2:25 p.m., rioters breached the east side doors to the rotunda. And then right after 2:40 p.m., rioters breached the east side doors near the Ways and Means room. Once the rioters infiltrated the Capitol, they moved through the crypt, the rotunda, the hallways leading to the House chambers, and even inside the Senate chambers.
Individuals associated with two violent extremist groups have been charged with seditious conspiracy in connection with the January 6th attack. One is the Oath Keepers. They are a group of armed anti-government extremists. The other group is the Proud Boys. They promote white supremacist beliefs and have engaged in violence with people they view as their political enemies. Members of both groups
don't you
have
view
already
them as your
pled
political
guilty
enemies?
to crimes
Just
associated with the January 6th
idea.
attack. Mr. Quested, as part of the documentary you've been filming, you gained access to the Proud Boys and their leader, Enrique Tarrio. Your crew filmed them in Washington, D.C. on the evening of January 5th and then on January 6th. On January 5th, the night before the
Is there a
attack,
question in there somewhere?
you were with the head of the Proud Boys, Mr. Tarrio, in Washington, D.C. What happened?
We picked up Mr. Tarrio from jail. He'd been arrested for carrying some magazines, some extra capacity magazines, and he took responsibility for the burning of the Black Lives Matter flag that was stolen from the church on December the 12th. We were attempting to get an interview with Mr. Tarrio. We had no idea of any of the events that were going to subsequently happen. We drove him to pick up his bags from the property department of the police, which is just south of the mall. We picked up his bags and went to get some other bags from the Phoenix Hotel, where we encountered Mr. Stuart Rhodes from the Oath Keepers. By the time I'd gone to park the car, my colleague was saying, who'd got into the car with Mr. Tarrio, that they had moved to a location around the corner, the parking garage of the Hall of Legends, I believe. And so we quickly drove over there. We drove down into the parking garage and filmed the scene of Mr. Tarrio and Mr. Rhodes and certain other individuals in that garage. We then continued to follow Mr. Tarrio. There was some discussion about where he was going to go. He ended up going towards a hotel in Baltimore, and we conducted an interview with him in the hotel room. And then we returned to DC for that night. And what was interesting that night actually was that was the first indication that DC was much more busy than it had been any other time we'd been here, because we couldn't get into the hotels we wanted to, and we
Did you try
ended up at a
Travelocity?
hotel that was not as satisfactory as we would hoped.
Thank you. So what you're saying is you filmed the meeting between Mr. Tarrio and Oath Keepers leader Stuart Rhodes, right?
Indeed.
You couldn't hear what was said, but according to the Justice Department indictment of Mr. Tarrio, a participant referenced the Capitol. Now, on the morning of January 6th, you learned the Proud Boys would gather.
This is
near
a
the
very
rally
strange kind of
scheduled
testimony
to take place
where
near the White
the
House.
questioner just tells them all
What
the
time did you meet
answers.
up with the Proud Boys?
This is like
what
very
was happening
strange.
It's
when
very
they met?
strange. You were there on
We met up
January
with the
6th
Proud
with the
Boys,
Proud Boys, and you had a
somewhere around
conversation which they
10:30
planned to
a.m.
riot
and
the
they were
Capitol.
starting to walk
Okay.
down the mall, easterly direction towards the Capitol. There was a large contingent, more than I had expected.
We're well
And I
beyond
was
leading.
confused to
I
a
don't know where
certain
we're
extent
at.
why we were walking away
Providing
from
the
the president's
answer.
speech, because that's what I felt we were there to cover.
So at 10:30 a.m., that's early in the day. That's even before President Trump had started speaking. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
So how many Proud Boys would you estimate were marching together to the Capitol?
A couple of hundred, potentially. Yeah, I'd say a couple of hundred
How did you
Proud Boys
determine
were
they were
marching
Proud
towards
Boys?
the Capitol at that point.
At the time, was the area heavily guarded?
No, that was, I remember we walked we walked down the mall, we walked to the right of the reflecting pool, and then north along the road that leads to the Peace Circle. And as we were walking past the Peace Circle, I framed the Proud Boys to the right of my shot with the
Foundation.
Capitol behind, and we see one sole police officer at the barriers, which subsequently breached. We then walk up and past a tactical unit preparing, and you see that in the film where the man questions their duty and their honor, and you see maybe a dozen Capitol Police putting on their riot gear.
So how would you describe the atmosphere at that time?
The atmosphere it seemed to be much darker. I make efforts to create a familiarity between myself and my subjects to make them feel comfortable. And the atmosphere was much darker at this day than had been in these other days. And there was also a contingent of Proud Boys that I hadn't met before from Arizona who appeared to wear these orange hats and had orange armbands.
So when the Proud Boys went back down the hill to the Peace Circle, did a larger crowd start together?
Well, no, first of all, we went round to the back and down the steps and we took some photographs on the east side of the Capitol. And then we went for lunch. We went for tacos.
Tacos.
So, Mr. Preston, you're a journalist, so you're careful.
Hey
to
guys,
stick
let's go
to
get tacos and
things
margaritas
that
before
you
we go
have
storm the
observed.
Capitol.
But what you told us is highly relevant.
Yeah.
Let me highlight a few key facts that you and others have provided the committee. First, there was a large group of Proud Boys present at the Capitol. We know that from multiple sources. You now estimate that there were around 250 to 300 individuals that you've testified. They weren't there for President Trump's speech. We know this because they left that area to march toward the Capitol before the speech began. They walked around the Capitol that morning. I'm concerned this allows them to see what defenses were in place and where weaknesses might be. And they decided to launch their attack at the Peace Circle, which is the front door of the Capitol complex. It's the first security perimeter that those marching from the ellipse would have to come to as they move toward the Capitol. The Peace Circle walkway was always where the thousands of angry Trump supporters would arrive after President Trump sent them from the lips. The Proud Boys
why do we even need
timed their
witnesses?
attack to the moments before the start of the joint session.
Dare Chipotle run out of chicken?
Which is also where President Trump directed the angry mob, quote, "We fight like hell," end quote. He told them before sending them down Pennsylvania Avenue, right to where the Proud Boys gathered and where you were filming. Now, a central question is whether the attack on the Capitol was coordinated and planned. What you witnessed is what a coordinated and planned effort would look like. It was the culmination of
a central question is whether it's planned. Well, what you
spearheaded
witnessed, I'm not going to ask you.
President
But what
Trump.
you witnessed is definitely what that would look like.
Thank you
Oh,
for
okay.
your
That's good
eyewitness
news.
account of the lead up to the breach of the Peace Circle. This brings us to a point in time where you and Officer Edwards.
You gotta
was
laugh,
close
guys.
to
You gotta
proximity.
laugh. You gotta laugh so you
At
don't
this
cry.
point, I reserve the balance of my time pursuant to 5C, Section 8 of House Resolution 503. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Cheney, for questioning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Officer Edwards, I want to start by thanking you
Central
for your
question is
service,
whether or not
and
Trump
thank
is
you
the
for
worst
your
president of all
courage. Thank you
time.
for being
What
here
you
this
saw
evening.
is the worst president of all
I
time.
know that it's not easy to relive what happened for you and for the officers behind you and for the family members of officers in the audience this evening. But it's really important for the country to have a full accounting and understand what happened. I want to start, Officer Edwards, with a short clip that shows the horrible moment when you were injured as the Peace Circle was breached. Officer Edwards, can you describe the crowd that had assembled at the Peace Circle as you and your fellow officers stood behind and guarded the bike racks at the Peace Circle?
Yes, so
Are bike racks a standard part
there
of
were about,
riot
I
prep?
want to say about 5 of us on that line.
I mean, people have to understand, like the U.S. Capitol in
So
Washington,
there was
D.C.
our
is
bike
the
rack,
most
and then at the
well-protected
bottom of the Pennsylvania Avenue
place in the
walkway,
world,
right
probably
by
the
Peace
world.
Circle, there was another bike rack.
They've
So
got
the
bike
crowd
racks.
had kind of
You should have had more
gathered
than bike racks.
there. It was the crowd led by
You're good at
Joseph
stopping bikes,
Biggs,
so you know.
and they were mostly in
They have
civilian
multiple
clothes.
special
There were
forces
some
teams that can get to the White House in
who
under
had
13
military
minutes.
fatigues on. We could see people with bulletproof vests on, things like that.
The special forces
They
team
didn't
used bike
seem,
racks.
extremely cohesive, but they had
I
gathered
watched
there in their
a series
outfits,
on Discovery of the
but they had
training of
gathered
SEAL Team
there
234.
together.
234, yeah.
and,
I got a couple
don't-
buddies that went through that
Joseph
class.
Biggs started,
Don't remember the bike racks.
he had a
Yeah.
micro or a megaphone, and he
I never saw
started
that.
talking about, first it was things kind of relating to Congress, and then the tables started turning once the what is now the Arizona group is what you said, the crowd with orange hats, they came up chanting F-U-C-K, Antifa, and they joined that group. And once they joined that group, Joseph Biggs' rhetoric turned to
What caliber of bike rack were they using?
the Capitol Police. He started asking us questions like, you didn't miss a paycheck during the pandemic. Mentioning stuff about our pay scale was mentioned.
It's public
And,
information.
Started
scale?
turning the tables on us. And
You could look it up.
I can, conservatively say probably hundreds of civil disturbance events. I know when I'm being turned into a villain, and that's when I turned to my sergeant and I stated the understatement of the century. I said, Sarge, I think we're going to need a few more people down here. And so after that, I think they started conferring. They went a little silent. They started conferring among each other. I saw the person now identified as Ryan Samsel. He put his arm around Joseph Biggs, and they were talking, and then they started approaching the first barricade. They ripped the first barricade down, and they approached our bike racks. At that time, we started holding on, grabbing the bike racks. There weren't many of us, so I grabbed the middle between two different bike racks. And, I wasn't under any pretense that I could hold it for very long, but I just wanted to, make sure that we could get more people down and get our CDU units time to answer the call. So we started grappling over the bike racks. I felt the bike rack come on top of my head, and I was pushed backwards, and my foot caught the stair behind me, and my chin hit the handrail, and then at that point I had blacked out, but the back of my head clipped the concrete stairs behind me.
They weren't American-made bike racks.
And
that's
you
the
were knocked
problem.
unconscious. Is that right, Officer Edwards?
Yes, ma'am.
But then when you regained consciousness, even with the injuries, you returned to duty. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. At that time, adrenaline kicked in. I ran towards the West Front, and I tried to hold the line at the Senate steps at the Lower West Terrace. More people kept coming at us. It just seemed like, more and more people started, coming onto the West Front. They started overpowering us. And that was right about when MPD's officers showed up. Their bike officers pushed the crowd back and allowed our CDU units as well as theirs to form that line that you see, that very thin line between us and the protesters or the rioters.
Why were the civil
at
disrupt
that time.
units
I
not
fell
already
behind that line,
there?
and
In
for
position.
a while, I started decontaminating
I mean, they knew the thing
people
was going to
who had
happen at the
gotten
ellipse.
sprayed,
Yeah, I mean,
It's like they weren't worried about spillover.
and treating people medically who needed it.
And then you were injured again there on the West Terrace. Is that right, Officer Edwards?
Yes, ma'am. So after a while, I got back on the line. It was on the house side of the Lower West Terrace. And I was holding that line for a while. There weren't many of us over there. And Officer Sicknick was behind me for most of the time, for about 30 to 45 minutes that I was down there. We were just, as the best we could, we were just, grappling over bike racks and trying to hold them as quick as possible. All of a sudden, I see movement to the left of me, and I turned, and it was Officer Sicknick with his head in his hands, and he was ghostly pale, which I figured at that point that he had been sprayed, and I was concerned. My cop alarm bells went off. Because if you get sprayed with pepper spray, you're going to turn red.
Yeah, it sucks.
Just about as pale as this sheet of paper. And so I looked back to see what had hit him, what had happened, and that's when I got sprayed in the eyes as well. I was taken to be decontaminated by another officer, but we didn't get the chance because we were then tear gassed.
And we are going to play just a brief
By
clip
whom?
of that
Tear gas by your
moment
incident?
that you've just described, Officer Edwards. Officer Edwards, I just want to thank you for being here. And I know, again, how difficult it is. I know the family of Officer Sicknick as well, who's here tonight. One of the things one of the Capitol Police officers said to me recently was to ask me whether or not, as members of Congress, all of us understood that on that day, on January 6th, when we were evacuated from the chamber, were led to a safe, undisclosed location, whether we knew that so many of you had rushed out of the building and into the fight. And I can assure you that we do know that, and that we understand how important your service is. Thank you for your continued work with our committee and the interviews, and thank you very much for both of you for being here this evening. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Edwards, can you give us one memory of that awful day that stands out most vividly in your mind?
I can. That time when I talked about falling behind MPD's line, I remember because I had been kind of shielded away because I was holding those stairs. So I wasn't able to really see what was going on over here.
Did they say why they decided to do this at 8 o'clock at night? I mean, half these people look like they should be taking their Metamucil and headed to bed.
I don't think they formally said, but I mean, it's for the prime time.
And I saw, I can just remember my breath catching in my throat because what I saw was just a war scene. It was something like I had seen out of the movies. I couldn't believe my eyes. There were officers on the ground, they were bleeding, they were throwing up, they were, they had I mean, I saw friends with blood all over their faces. I was slipping in people's blood. You know, I was catching people as they fell. It was carnage. It was chaos. I can't even describe what I saw. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that as a police officer, as a law enforcement officer, I would find myself in the middle of a battle. You know, I'm trained to detain, a couple of subjects and handle a crowd, but I'm not combat trained. And that day, it was just hours of hand-to-hand combat, hours of dealing with things that were way beyond any law enforcement officer has ever trained for. And I just remember that moment of stepping behind the line and just seeing the absolute war zone that the West Front had become.
Let me thank you for your service and obviously your bravery that you have told the world about tonight. It's unfortunate that you had to defend the Capitol from fellow Americans. None of us would ever think that that would have to happen, but it did. So let me thank our witnesses for joining us tonight and sharing their experiences with America. Throughout my chairmanship of this committee, I've continuously vowed that this committee will ensure a comprehensive account of the heroic acts on January 6th, and that we will follow the facts wherever they lead.
The comprehensive
Your
facts regarding
testimony is
government
an
action.
essential part of that record and helps us do our job. Mr. Quested, thank you for sharing your footage and your account of the day's events with us. The images you recorded and have shared with the committee do a better job than any of our words in reinforcing the violence of January 6th. We hope that the power of your footage helped encourage all Americans to consider how citizens with so much in common could viciously brawl at the seat of their democratic government. Officer Edwards, thank you for your brave service, as I indicated, on January 6th, and all you did to protect us, and most importantly, our democracy. If you and your fellow officers hadn't held the line against those violent insurrectionists, we can only imagine the disaster that would have ensued. Your heroism in the face of danger is admirable, and your will to continue to protect and serve despite your serious injuries should be an inspiration to all of us. We wish you a continued recovery and look forward to seeing you back in uniform sometime soon. The members of the Select Committee may have additional questions for tonight's witnesses, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. Without objections, members will be permitted 10 business days to submit statements for the record, including opening remarks and additional questions for the witnesses. The witnesses have just told us what they heard the rioters saying while they stormed the Capitol on that day. Now we're going to hear it from the rioters themselves. Without objection, I include in the record a video presentation.
That's all the questions they had for them?
Yep.
What really made me want to come was the fact that, I had supported Trump all that time. I did believe, that the election was being stolen. And Trump asked us to come.
He personally asked for us to come to D.C. that day. And I thought, for everything he's done for us, if this is the only thing he's going to ask of me, I'll do it.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Did you recall President Trump mentioning going to the Capitol during his speech?
Oh, yeah. So that's one of my disappointments. He said he was going to go with us, that he was going to be there.
I know why I was there, and that's because he called me there and he laid out what is happening in our government. He laid it out.
But I remember Donald Trump telling people to be there, right? I mean, to support.
So you mentioned that the president asked you. Do you remember a specific message?
Basically, yeah, he asked for us to come to DC, that big things are gonna happen.
What got me interested, he said, I have something very important to say on January 6th or something like that. Is what got me interested to be there.
You know, Trump has only asked me for two things. He asked me for my vote, and he asked me to come on January 6th.
June 13th,
When
10
the
a.m.
committee reconvenes
Put it on the
next
ballot.
week, we're going to examine the lies that convinced
Be there.
those men and others to storm
We
the
should
Capitol.
announce it now as a channel.
Try
and
to
start,
stop the transfer of power.
Yeah.
We're
Start
going to
hyping
take
it.
a close look at the first part of Trump's attack on the rule of law, when he hit the fuse that ultimately resulted in the violence of January 6th. Without objection, and with that, the committee stands adjourned.
Well, that is the end of that for the evening.
That was just not much substance in terms of evidence. He told us to come to Washington. He told us.
Yeah, he told us to come to Washington. He told us to be there.
Yeah.
He told us
I
to
can
go.
tell you
he
go
told,
to the bank.
He told us to go to the Capitol, make our voices heard. Okay. Just waiting. Waiting for something, illegal. Anytime would be fine. Freedom of speech is still a thing. So I'm not sure how they heard, let's enter the Capitol and, whatever, but Trump didn't say that, so yeah.
No, the witnesses, I mean, the filmmaker, he wasn't really asked he didn't produce any type of incriminating evidence on anyone. Like, yes, I was there when a conversation took place, but I didn't hear anything they said. Well,
this is the strangest witness testimony ever. As
Yeah.
a questioner is just giving him everything. It's like,
Yeah. Do I
you
think
were there the
could
night
the officer
before
have been
with the
legitimately
Proud
hurt?
Boys. You were
Yeah,
meeting
I
at
don't know.
8:47 at Nathan's hot dog stand, and you were having the Coney Island hot dog with relish with Peter Gould from the Proud Boys, talking about the conspiracy and how Trump wanted to take over the Capitol. What happened next?
I mean, if someone said Trump was smart enough not to incriminate himself. Well, this is a trial based off of, producing incriminating evidence on Trump. So if he didn't incriminate himself, like, what exactly are we doing here?
Politics? Well, that's easy. Politics, yeah. Like, trying to find something to do illegal. It's like, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I'm not condoning any of the actions that took place that day. Obviously, as a former law enforcement officer, I never want to see anybody do those things.
Neither do I.
I just, I want to see, like, if you're going to put these charges out there, even on this last trial, the Johnny Depp and stuff, I work in evidence. If it,
Yeah. And I have no problem with charging them all. It's like, this is where I think people somewhat misunderstand me, because I've done 57 or 58 of these things on my channel, going through them, and except for one where I'm like, oh no, I think this guy might have a good case. Except for one of them, I was like, oh yeah, all these guys have broken the law. So it's just following the evidence. The day after the Capitol riots, I did on my channel, I did basically a let's go through the prizes our contestants can win episode where I went through like 20 or so different federal charges that seemed possible, for the various people that were involved.
Yeah, and telling people, I mean, to fight like hell if you don't fight. I mean, it's still not. I mean, you need to
And
to
you can
have
find
that.
and you can find Democrats using that kind of rhetoric, and Nick Rikita has it on his stream every night where he does as part of his intro, where they're all like fight, 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 fight.
Yeah, and
And it's
did the
like, yeah,
one
it's very common rhetoric. And then as people pointed out, like Democrats have gone there and asked to throw out votes during the electoral process.
didn't they have the one lady? She was like encouraging. It was something that happened. Maxine Waters, didn't she make some comments about inciting violence? I mean, I
Yeah, I
don't
mean
condone that.
you can find very similar behavior from the Democrats, at least in terms of their rhetoric. You can find them trying to protest votes. You can find them, calling for votes to be thrown out by the electoral or by Congress, electoral votes to be thrown out. So it's like, all right, what exactly are we talking about here?
Yeah.
Where is the point of differentiation? And it's like, well, I can't really find it. And I mean, Mike Pence was right. Mike Pence didn't have the power that Trump seemed to think he had from somewhere. Although the Electoral Count Act is slightly ambiguous, but Pence's reading is correct. But as I've also mentioned, I covered maybe 20 of those cases from Trump when he was doing the challenges of the election, and like all of his election challenges were also shit. So I have no problem doing legal analysis against Trump. I have no problem, doing things against Capitol rioters if it's like, but it's like if the law doesn't support it, I'm like, well, that's my legal opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, like for me, I get neither one of us benefit anything. Like Donald Trump's not going to come to me like, here you go, here's a fantastic, $1 million or something. I just we still live in the United States of America, and I want to see if someone's being implicated in something or potentially charged. I want to see the evidence. I don't want to see,
It's just going to be posturing. It's posturing all the way down.
Yeah.
You're not going to miss anything. But if you would like to do more, you can pencil in the 13th at 10 a.m. Eastern.
I will be free, so just send me the link and I'll jump on. And
fun and exciting. All right, let's read some super chats.
Sounds good.
John F. Face says Trump cultists are hilarious. They are kind of hilarious too. Yeah, the people the people with the following Trump until the end of the earth are pretty hilarious. So yeah, they're fun too. What else will they cover in the next 154 hearings? Kind of more of the same. Kelly says, I'm sad you're amused. You're so biased. I might be biased, but it is amusing because it's such a farce. It's not a legal process. DL0 Entropy says, your thoughts on what happens if there's a different president elected before the 2003 hearings are done. What happens if Trump gets elected again? Do we still do the hearings? I don't know. Danielle says, that place was defended like fortress during peaceful BLM protests, but not this. Why might that be? Why take for anyone so long to stop this? Good questions. Yeah. Christopher Howell, $1.99, thank you. $4.99 from Christopher. Don't believe they could put down a riot? Look at the World War I veterans rioting for back pay. Patton helped put it down. Called bonus army riots. Jordan says, hey, dude, remember during the second impeachment hearing the left doctor to tweet and put in evidence? Is anyone taking it seriously? I'm not sure I remember specifically that, but it wouldn't surprise me. Peter says, sorry about the swear words, my friend. Yeah, no problem. Johnny became a new member. Thank you for hitting that join button. Bison said, I'm waiting for the Tyler Perry to rip off his mask and say something funny. I appreciate that comment. Dirty says, yeah, why was the National Guard there? Who's in charge of DC National Guard? That person should be responsible. Well, I mean, Nancy Pelosi could have asked for help. A lot of people could have asked for help. And
from my understanding, they were offered.
Yeah. Christopher Howell said all this to keep Trump from running 2024. I think DeSantis is a much better pick going forward than Trump. But that's me. Spider Queen says, how's anyone expected to believe a black Cuban man named Enrico Tarrio is a white nationalist? Good question. John F. Fay says, we may be polar opposites politically, but your careful consideration of law and evidence in all cases is why I support this channel. Onward to 100K. Yeah, if you haven't subscribed already, so hit the subscribe button. See if we can get there. Darrell says, if they're so concerned with protecting democracy, why is the Capitol full of Congress and the VP allowed to be overrun by an unarmed mob? And Kelly Jacobs hit that join button. Thank you very much for doing so. Well, I believe that will bring us to the end of tonight's proceedings. We learned nothing except that posturing is still in vogue as it ever was. There was Christopher Howell said, does anyone feel the Battle of Athens, Tennessee is about to repeat it on a larger scale? Asking for a friend, you're on awesome, Kurt. I'm not familiar with that battle.
I'm not either.
Athens, Tennessee.
I'll have to look that up because I'm not familiar with that one.
You got me. All right. So thank you very much for everyone who was here. If you haven't hit the subscribe button already, please hit the subscribe. If you hadn't hit the join button, please hit the join button. And for 99 cents, you too can become a member and an uncivilian. Hit that like button on your way out. We will be back later. I hope all is well. Cheers, my friends. Until later, and goodbye.